Brexit. So Brexit is a huge theme. It's difficult to understand. In fact, many people, when Brexit happened in the European Union, and particularly here in Spain, they'd say, "What's Brexit all about? I don't understand Brexit." And it was always very difficult to explain Brexit as an Englishman, partly because one, I don't understand it myself, and the deep reasons for the antagonism that many, particularly English people, felt towards the European Union, but also because it has a dimension which is deeper and um, it's got deeper roots in history. And I want to look at that aspect. I'm not looking at the complete picture of Brexit, which would involve much more sociological, economic, and political investigation. I just want to look at one cultural dimension to help you understand why some people feel it is natural to support Brexit. And it relates to this idea of the Jolly Jack Tar. Now, if you remember, the Jolly Jack Tar arose as an image of an English sailor in the 18th and early 19th century. Tar was the ponytail that he had at the back of his head, and jolly because he was happy in his freedom. Now, the English, ever since the Black Legend and before, and into the Napoleonic Wars, they felt that they were defending a certain idea of freedom against the totalitarianism of the European continent. So that is a certain kind of independence in the units, if you like, of English society. And in the mythology, that goes back to a deep feeling that the English countryside that was built by the Anglo-Saxons. And this is not right or left. I just want to emphasize this. It's not whether you're Labour Party or Conservative Party. It is a deep sense that the English countryside was created by a free people. So this is paradoxical because many of those images of free England come from the south, and the south of England, particularly the southeast, was more pro-European Union than pro-Brexit. Brexit was definitely supported more heavily and more fanatically, if you like, by working class communities that had traditionally been uh, Labour supporting rather than Conservative supporting. This led to a peculiar sense of alliance between parties in the UK that were not traditionally compatible. So here's an example. Uh, when Brexit started, there was a kind of balloon figure, this kind of cartoon clown character called Boris Johnson, who appeared. He'd already been a television celebrity, and he'd come across as kind of posh, private school educated toff with absurd views. And he sort of floated up in English politics and ended up as the mayor of London and then as the foreign secretary, which was an extraordinary occurrence, and then eventually as the prime minister. And when he became the prime minister, the reason that he won that election, one of the reasons that he won that election, was because he had this theme, which was get Brexit done. So Brexit had been an idea in English politics for a long time before. Ever since the 1970s, there had been Eurosceptics on both sides of the political spectrum. Many Labour Party members had been deeply skeptical about Europe, uh, most famously Peter Shaw, and also many right-wing conservatives were skeptical about the European Union. And they were skeptical about the European Union for the same reasons, which is what played into Boris Johnson's success. The reason was that they felt that the European Union represented a democratic deficit. That is, that the typical English parliamentarian system, the parliamentary system, could not work within within the European Union. So I have to explain this to Spanish people who frequently laugh. In the traditional English parliamentary system, you vote for your member of parliament. It's your local member of parliament. And that member of parliament is your representative in parliament. Parliamentarians are connected to their constituency. In fact, they're expected to spend some time in their constituency. They have what are called surgeries. So that's like an open office where their constituents can go and talk to them about the real problems they have. So in the United Kingdom, there is historically a connection between parliamentarians and their constituents. I made a mistake when I was here at first. That's 20 years ago now. A friend of mine was having a problem, and I said, "Well, why don't you write to your political representative?" And she laughed like a drain and said, "Don't be silly. That doesn't work here. Where are you from?" Um, and this was curious to me because I had written to my political representative once or twice in the past, and I had received replies. And that my political representative I hadn't voted for. It was a Conservative MP that I hadn't voted for, but he still represented my issue. Um, so that's an interesting difference between the UK and the European Union. But anyway, getting back to the point about the Jolly Jack Tar, um, many of the people in the north of England particularly felt that their views were being taken away from them. They were being disenfranchised by the European Union because their political representatives could no longer represent their views in Parliament effectively, as so much of the law that was uh, affecting their daily lives came from the European Union. You have to understand that the north of England grew up in opposition to the governing of the south, the governing of aristocrats and technocrats from the south of England. So they rebelled against that. The typical slums and working class housing of the north of England gave rise to a strong working class culture, which what made a big part of that Jolly Jack Tar image. If you remember, I looked at Sharp, which is that Bernard Cornwell figure of the working class soldier who is a sergeant, and he successfully does what his ineffective and ineffectual superiors cannot do because of their conditioned ways of thinking. That is a strong part of English psychological legend, mythology, that the working man has more to say than his posh superiors. Now, in the battle for Brexit, this idea of the Jolly Jack Tar, the salt of the earth Englishman against the on the one hand posh and on the other hand technocratic superiors, um, it played an important role and continues to this day. And I'm going to give you two images right now. One is of this figure, and his name is Nigel Farage. He's famous in the UK, perhaps not famous anywhere else. And he, for years, represented what was called the UK Independence Party, which was like a kind of super nationalist, anti-Europe party. This transformed into the Brexit Party. And when Boris Johnson actually got Brexit done, was his famous motto, uh, Nigel Farage sort of floated to the top. Here he is, Nigel Farage, and look at the way he presents himself. He's got a typical English pint of beer in his hand. He's got the cloth cap on his head and a jacket. Uh, he looks like he could have appeared in Last of the Summer Wine. This Last of the Summer Wine was a famous comedy program that that aired on the television in the 1980s, 70s, and 80s, set in the north of England. Here's the last character. This character is just like a Jolly Jack Tar. He's an ex-soldier. He's someone who has fought for his working class community. He's been in prison many times for his racist views and his violently anti-Muslim expressions of distaste. And he is called Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson is not his real name, but he's taken a name that conveys the idea behind, or the feeling behind the Jolly Jack Tar. That is, I represent the common Englishman. So here I hope I've conveyed something of the idea of why Brexit was so popular with the common English people. It's difficult to understand it fully. Next time, we will continue to look at aspects of English culture. Okay, so see you next time.